our youth. How our children are 7 times more likely to commit suicide than non-natives. We could talk about a loss of our land and culture. How we couldn't even practice our own religions until 1978, a year after I was born. We could talk about how history doesn't talk about the genocide of our people or any indigenous people worldwide. We could talk about our elders being forced to assimilate or die. How we lost so much culture through the boarding schools. We could talk about how the United Nations proclaims indigenous people to be the most poverty-stricken and disenfranchised groups in almost every country in the world. But without our planet, without our environment, we won't have anything. None of these issues will matter without a planet to sustain us. 1 year and 4 days ago, the Idle No More movement was started by First Nations women bringing light to the environmental degradations in Canada. They started a new awakening around the world. Indigenous people banding together to say enough is enough. We will be idle no more. Today, we are standing in solidarity with those Indigenous communities worldwide. In Canada, the First Nations people of that country have been fighting for the last year the environmental degradation caused by hydraulic fracturing, otherwise known as fracking. The Canadian government has made it clear its policy of extracting oil anywhere it can be found in that country. Oftentimes, this process pollutes local water sources with between 600 and 1,000 different chemicals known to cause cancer through carcinogens. We don't know how many chemicals because the oil companies keep it a secret. Many of those water sources flow directly from Canada into the United States. 1 month ago, a blockade led to violence between the First Nations people, environmental protesters, and police. Tear gas and less than lethal rounds were used, which have the capacity to do permanent physical damage or mortally wound those if they're misused. They were knowingly fired into a crowd that contained elders, women, and children. The RCMP came back today to protect oil assets in that part of the country. So let's have a prayer for those folks that are dealing with that again today. This violence is counter to the peaceful protests that Idle No More has been supporting for the last year. Worldwide, environmental issues affect Indigenous people. The Fukushima nuclear disaster not only affects the entire Pacific and perhaps world populations, but it will be felt most acutely in subsistence living groups around the Pacific Rim. Unsurprisingly, measurements of radioactive materials in Fukushima Bay are the highest they have been since the spill began 2 years ago. Daily, 300 tons of nuclear waste are dumped into the Pacific Ocean. Reports are starting to come in of massive die-offs of sea lions and salmon along the west coast of the United States. Polar bears have been seen missing patches of fur and with open sores in the Arctic. 36 major indigenous groups in the United States alone are subsistence livers from the Pacific Ocean. In the Gulf Coast 2 years ago, the BP oil spill, 5 million barrels of oil, the largest maritime spill to date. All of that dumped into the Gulf Coast ecosystems. Between the oils and dispersant sprays, this is causing the long-term ecosystem degradation, economic collapse of the fishing industry, and total destruction of subsistence living groups in that area. There are around 20,000 American Indians in Louisiana alone that are affected by this. They represent 5 different major East Coast tribes that were removed forcefully in the 1830s to that area. They now stand to lose this way of life as well. Tribes in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas are facing the same fate. In Brazil, 8 tribes that live in and around the Xingu River tributary, a major tributary of the Amazon, are protesting a hydroelectric dam that'll flood 5,000 square kilometers, displacing 20 to 40